So here is footage on my Wwise project and Unity project with middleware integrated in. Everything that I've put into the Unity level is within this Wwise project. I'll go for everything in the Wwise project first. So first of all, I've got a random container with all of my tavern songs inside of it. This is just 6 songs from the Dragon Age Origins tavern album, which I had as part of my music collection. I've just put those all together inside of a random container, set it to continuous looping infinitely. It's standard randomization. It won't play the last 3 songs. Like it'll go 3 before repeating a song, and there's also a crossfade into them. This is just to represent a singer inside of the tavern. So I've also put a room reverb of a small area and a shelving EQ just to give authenticity of it being inside of a building. So if we play it, one song will play. We stop it and play it again, different song will play, and one more time, another different song. And if we were to leave this playing, keep it playing, it will just keep playing through all of these songs and then loop over again. Next thing in the Wwise project is the footstep switcher. This is a switch container. Inside of the switch container I have a load of random containers for each footstep surface. So if we have a look at the snow footsteps, for example, I've got 6 different snow samples. They've each been pitch randomized as well, so that they don't all sound the same. They've been put in a random order and it won't play the last one. It's set up in a step play mode, so if I play it a couple of times you'll hear different footsteps. And so that's the snow container, although on one of these footsteps, which I believe is the grass container, because I've got 8 different samples, instead of individually pitch shifting the individual samples, I've decided to pitch shift the container as a whole, but it's the same outcome which either way I do it, but in future I'd do them all just on the container because it's just easier and quicker. So if I play this a couple of times, you can hear the difference. So I've got these for a bunch of different surface types, and when we go back out into the switcher, if you set that to switch down there, I have a list of all the switches. I've assigned them all as well accordingly. So if you set the switch to concrete, play it a few times, play the different concrete samples. The same with, for example, let's try wood. As you can hear, they're different sounds. It's in a step play mode, so it'll play just one of them every time I hit play or it's triggered, and it will trigger from the according random container. I've also decided, it was a bit of an afterthought to be honest, but it still works perfectly fine, is as well as pitch randomizing all of them individually within the containers, I've also set a randomizer function to the volume of the switch container as a whole. And so if you hear, there's a slight volume difference each time a footstep is triggered. I have another switch container that I've put together, although this wasn't implemented into the game because I'm just not too sure on the coding for it all, but this would be, I'd assume that in the Viking village level, if it was developed further into a full game, you'd have weapons and you'd attack things. So I've made a switch container that would represent a sword being swung and hit things. So I have 2 switch states and 2 random containers. I've got a random container with all of the sword hits, which has a pitch shifter randomization on it. It's in play mode step. It's on standard random play type with it avoids repeating the last one played, so it won't ever play the same one twice in a row. as you can hear, a bunch of different sword hits, but I've also got the swooshes for the sword as well with the same pitch randomization on it. And then if you go back out to the sword switcher, I've created two sort of switch states for it. I've got a hit state and a miss state on the switches. So when a sword hits something, it will play both the sword hit and the sword swish randomizer boxes. And then if I switch it over to miss, it just plays the swoosh. This is just to represent swinging the sword, and then the outcome of whether or not it hits something or misses. To go with these two switch containers over in the game sinks, I've created a switch container with all of the different material surface types for the footsteps, and then with the hit and miss states for the sword switcher. I've also got a blend container for one of my loops. I've not been able to get the parameter working for this just because I've not been able to tie the time of day to my game level because I just wasn't sure how to do it. So on a continuous play mode, each loop is just set to infinitely loop. So I've got a daytime loop, so you can hear like birds calling, all of that sort of stuff. And then I've got a nighttime one where you can hear like insects and a couple of more nighttime animals calling out. And so then go back to the blend container and go to the blend track. You can see I've got a timeline from 0 to 24, representing 24 hours in a day from midnight to midnight. And I've got a couple of crossfade sections where it will change between day and night. So I've got this at around about the time where dawn would typically be in a day, and the same for dusk. And as I've got a parameter set to it as well, which is time of day, and it crossfades over. And so as I shift the time of day, it will crossfade over and change between the loops. So then if we go back and hit play on the nature loop blend container and go to the real time parameter, and as I slide it back along, it turns over into nighttime, then into daytime, and then into nighttime again. And so that's that loop, but because I've not been able to get it to work properly in the level, it just plays a default time which I believe was set to around midday. Then I've got the loop for the ocean. It's literally just a loop set up to play infinitely over and over. Got the same with the tavern ambience, which is the sound of the people in the tavern and not the performer. As you can hear, it's just people in a tavern just enjoying themselves, having drinks and all of that malarkey. And again, it's just looped infinitely. That's a test. We don't really need to worry about that. It was just a different torch loop. I have a couple of loops that aren't implemented in. I've got a thunderstorm loop here. It's just the sound of thunder. I was going to add a weather system into the game, but I'm not really sure how to code it. I didn't have enough time to learn how to code it. Again, it's set to loop infinitely, but what I was going to do with this was set up a volume parameter for the intensity of the thunder, so it'd be quieter or louder. Like maybe represent the thunder sort of being over a distance away, so when it's quieter it'd mean the storm's sort of over the other side of the mountains, and if it's louder it means the storm would be like over the top of you. And I'd also put it to just an on-off switch for if it was on. Then I also was going to do the exact same concept with a wind loop as well, have a switch for it to be on and off inside of a switch container, so when it's on the loop plays, when it's off silence plays. It's looped infinitely. and again the volume parameter to represent the intensity of the wind. So if it's strong winds, this would be really loud. If it's quiet winds, the volume would go down. Then on top of that as well, I've got a torch loop for all of the torches within the levels. It's just an infinite loop of fire sample, but I've also put a pitch variation on it, just so that each torch is a slightly different pitch. They don't all sound the same. So press play. Here it's ever so slightly different pitch. That just adds a little bit of realness, a little bit more naturality to it, just a bit more realistic. And then what I have as well that I've set up is for the interactive music. Because I wanted my level to be immersive, I didn't go full on with like a music proper soundtrack over the top of it. So I've essentially just got ambient music loops, just like a vocal. And the way these work is just through states that are assigned to certain parts of the level. So I've got the ocean bit, which is more towards like the jetties and the sea, which is the lowest pitch. Then it moves up to the village, which is when you're just in the central village bit. And as you're exiting the village up towards the mountain, it will go up in pitch again. This is sort of like represent the height, because the ocean bit's lower down and you gradually go uphill as you go towards the mountains. So if I was to press play, it's currently set to no states, but then if I set the state to ocean and press play, you can hear it's got the lowest pitch going. I've also set on play options where it continues to play on the switch change. This essentially just allows it to crossfade into each other. So it's on ocean now. If we were to move up to the village, the pitch goes up, and again with the mountains. And then this just loops over. Like I say, it's just 3 different samples that loop into each other. And in order for this music switch container to work, over in GameSyncs, I have a state container, state group. So I've got ocean state, mountain state, and village state, and they all work accordingly. So now if we move over into the Unity level, for the switches for the surface to walk upon, got dirt switches placed meticulously across the level, and then for the different bits of wood, so like all of these planks and walkways, and inside a couple of the buildings, so like this one here and the blacksmith over there, blacksmith in the market, what I've done is I've copied across the game object that all of these are, duplicated all of them, raised them up by transforming them like up one across the y-axis, I believe, and then turning the like mesh on, so it's just a mesh collider, turned it as a trigger, and set up a K switch on all of them, so that when you walk across all these woods, the wood's footsteps play, so it's linked to that, and then vice versa with all the dirt switches that I've put around. And with the 2 buildings that you can walk inside, as well as putting a switch on the floor to turn it to wood when you walk on it, I've also done an exit switch so that when you exit it turns back onto the dirt. I've set up the states as well, so you got an ocean state there, so whenever you're in this area of the level it will play the ocean loop, the ocean music loop, sorry. Then a mountain is up over the top there, and then there is a village one as well, which is central, and they all overlap slightly. So then if we press play and wait for it to load, just have to wait for it. Right, so now we've dropped into the level. As you can hear, there's a torch there. there's ones further up there. You can hear the ocean behind us, and you can hear the loop coming in at the top, below. And as I walk along the jetty, you can hear the wood footsteps. You can hear the spatialization as I move around as well. If I jump off the jetty, you can hear more like grassy footsteps. And if I jump back up, you can hear the wood footsteps. You can hear the different torches. Now as I've moved into the village, you can hear that the loop's gotten a bit higher in pitch. But you'll notice as well, I've also done another switch container for this rock. It was just as a test, but this plays one of the other footstep containers. This would in theory be applied to all of the other rocks like this in the level. And then if we go back on to the wooden planks, you can hear more wooden stuff. And as we go up towards the mountains as well, you can hear that the interactive music has gone up in pitch again as well. You can also hear the nature sounds coming from outside of the village. And if we walk back into the village, here still wooden footsteps. All of the torches have stuff. They're all slightly different pitch. It's not massively distinguishable, but if you do listen hard enough, you can hear it. So as we walk around the courtyard outside the blacksmith, it's grassy sound, dirt sound. As we step inside, it turns over into a wood sound. Then when we exit it again, it's back to the dirt sound. Just as we walk around, more wooden footsteps. And then as we walk into the market, it's wooden footsteps again. We jump down, gravel footsteps, and we go back onto the planks. The last thing to show is if we go up here to the tavern, you can hear coming from inside. It sounds like there's someone performing inside of it, with all the ambience as well. So you can hear the ambience of the tavern, all the people inside. Albeit the music is a lot louder, but that would be to represent that everyone's essentially listening to the performer. And I've got the shelving and reverb on both of those samples just to make it convincingly sound like it's coming from inside the building. And like I say, I've got these two balanced with each other just so that it sounds authentic. And I'm pretty sure that's everything in this level. I'm pretty sure I already mentioned this stone. I'm not sure what switch I used, I can check that. But that's pretty much everything placed inside of the level. I would have added in the wind and the thunderstorm and the other things, but I just didn't know how to code it properly. Then if we were to go and look inside of here, I have a feeling it's somewhere in the dirt switch. This is where I've not really labelled everything properly, but one of these switches is around the stone. I may have even put it somewhere else, but it's there. You can hear that it's there because it's working. So what I've done as well is I've had to put an object for Wwise to work with the sound banks. And there's also a Wwise listener on the camera of the character. That's what allows it all to work. And with the sound banks as well. So if that tavern that played earlier, that's just playing the tavern ambience loop and the tavern song switch container at the same time. As you can see, like I said, I've balanced them each other just so it sounds right. They've both got the effects over the top of them, but the way it works is that when the event plays, the tavern ambience loop will just keep playing over and over and over and over, and then the tavern songs will sort of cycle through over the top of it, and then that will sound quite authentically like someone performing in a tavern with an audience listening. And so all the events, the footstep is just a switcher inside of it, ambience, level ambience is just a switcher again. The nature loop is just a blend container inside of the event. Ocean's just a loop. The test was just a test, so we don't need to worry about that. And then the torches is just a torch loop inside. And then sound banks, just on a master sound bank. It's just all of the events just chucked inside of it. And then back over in Unity, like I said, there is an object, just can be placed anywhere because it's not a physical object, and that's the sound bank inside of the level which allows all of the sound to be heard. So that's my Wwise project and my Unity level, and them integrated into each other.